Now, before I get into it, if you could subscribe to the channel right now, drop a like on the video, it really helps out a lot. It only takes a second and it would be much appreciated. Anyways, let's get into the video. I think it's time we talk about Killian Hayes. Look, I wasn't planning on making a Pistons video every single day, even when the NBA season started, but it's been an eventful start to the season, which you wouldn't have thought I'd be saying after an 0-4 start, but regardless of not winning a game, it has been eventful and there's been a lot of things that have happened, including a number of debutants, a number of people coming from different teams and making their debut for the Pistons for the first time. There's been a lot of things happening, and you guys seem to enjoy the Pistons videos. I know there's a lot of Pistons fans that watch my channel, and I've had a particular amount of comments, and I've seen a number of comments, whether it be on Twitter, Instagram, the Pistons pages, where people are talking about Killian Hayes, and some people don't have too many concerns. Others have pretty serious concerns over his play to start the season. And let's not waste any time, because not to brag, it's not really bragging, but there's all these media outlets, these reporters that probably have seen 15 minutes of him play. Well, us Pistons fans, me included, have watched him pretty much since the first minute of preseason to the last minute that he just played against the Golden State Warriors. And what I've seen, well, there's been a mixed bag, but I've seen enough to suggest to me that he's going to be perfectly fine. Let's look at the numbers to start the season. 22 minutes a game over the course of 4 games. He's averaged 5 points on 27.6% from the field, 23% from 3, 1.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game, to go along with a couple of turnovers, I believe. Not the greatest numbers. They're bad numbers. Let's be honest. Not very good numbers. But we have to start with the positives, and if there's one positive to take out, it's got to be his playmaking. To me, he's already shown that he's capable of running a pick and roll. He's capable of attacking the rim and kicking out to open shooters, and he's capable of finding open cutters. The thing is with passing, you can make the right passes 9 times out of 10, but it might not necessarily reflect on the assist sheet. Now, I'm not saying he's been someone that's made the right passes 9 times out of 10, because sometimes he's turned the ball over. Most obviously was the time against the Timberwolves. Pistons were leading. They went up the floor, I believe, 3 consecutive times, 3 consecutive turnovers, trying to get the ball to Blake as he was posting up from the 3-point line, which, why he's posting up at the 3-point line, that's a different issue. But you look at the best game Killian Hayes has had of his career so far against an undefeated Atlanta team, an okay defense. I don't think that's what they're going to pride themselves on. And obviously Trae Young isn't a fantastic defender, but he wasn't always matched up against Trae Young. Hayes clearly had his best game. He got the most minutes, so it wasn't a coincidence. Derrick Rose sat. I'm not saying Derrick Rose is a bad influence, but sometimes it might take the pressure off him, because he knew coming into that game, even if he starts slowly, D Rose isn't going to come in and take his minutes towards the end of the game. You then also had him just get a bit more momentum. Blake wasn't there hogging the ball. All of a sudden, he had 8 assists, 10 points, and 1 turnover. That's a fantastic game for a rookie. He only shot 33% from the field. But if you're looking at that game in isolation, the game against the Hawks, I think that's the best example of a game where Hayes has had everything suited to his strengths, and we've seen how it's panned out. What he was doing in that game. He found Mason Plumlee on a couple of lobs, something they need to look to do a bit more. The pick and roll game, something they haven't executed enough. Considering his ability to chuck it upstairs, he's very capable of doing so. It doesn't help the Pistons don't have an athletic center. I know Andre Drummond's caused some issues. He wasn't fantastic. He's overpaid. He would be fantastic for the development of Killian Hayes. I'm just being honest. Setting screens, those hard screens, rolling to the basket, throwing up lobs. I can promise you, Hayes would be averaging 6 assists per game if he had someone like Andre Drummond alongside him. It's that simple. But it's not that simple, because there's more things to it. So we've talked about the Hawks game. That was the best game of his career, but let's just talk about his game as a whole, because there's been more from it. So we've seen his passing. I like his playmaking. I think he can make a lot of passes. He's very left-hand dominant. That was his issue coming out of the draft. He's a very left-handed dominant player. And I think that's more of an issue when it comes to his scoring. But his whip passes, when he gets into the lane, he finds open shooters. He'll find open cutters. I can look at the Cavs game. He got 2 assists that game. I could go through about 6 plays from that game where he found an open cutter under the rim, and then they tracked it back out to the 3-point line. I don't know what was happening that game, but more so than any other game I've seen, he was finding open cutters and making fantastic passes that just weren't resulting in assists, and there's not much you can do about that. You've then got other games in preseason that I saw. The first game he played, he was finding open shooters in the corner. He's fantastic at finding the open shooters. Jeremy Grant, Josh Jackson, all those guys setting up for 3-pointers. He finds them, and obviously some of them have missed open shots as well that have led to less assists. That's going to happen. But I have no problems with his passing. I think that's something that's already shown that at the very least, if he continues to develop and go on this path, I have no doubts he's going to be someone that averages 6 to 8 assists, maybe even more over the course of his career. The bigger issue has been his scoring. Well, he's averaged 5 points a game. His best game against the Hawks was a 10-point game, the only double-digit game of his career so far, and he's coming off a 0-point game against the Warriors. The only concern I really have with Hayes is his shot selection. That's something that I think you can teach. He's also got an issue with the fact that he doesn't really get a high arc on his shot like a D'Angelo Russell. The only issue with his step back, it's a very hard move because of that separation I mentioned. Yeah, he's taking multiple steps back and he's doing so at pace. It's not an easy shot to make, and that has led to a number of missed shots. If you look at all of his three-pointers, he's shooting 23%. I'd say around 70% of those threes have been step-back threes, and he's made maybe 2 of them. So that has been a lot of the reason behind his shooting percentage being down. He's taking tough contested step-back threes. As time goes on, hopefully that's something that he can have as a go-to move, because it's great to have that as a go-to move. But I don't think he's necessarily a terrible shooter. I've seen him with his feet set. I've seen it when someone else is creating for him. He can make an open 3. He's done it a couple of times. But when he's taking those step-back threes, obviously his shooting percentages are going to be down, and that's been the case. But that doesn't mean he's a bad offensive player. Something else that's been a little bit concerning, some people might have had concern with, getting to the rim. He has been blocked a few times. It's his predictability with that left hand. I've seen him a couple of times get through to the rim and he goes up with that left hand every time and he kind of comes from the side. He hasn't really gone with a reverse hand. He kind of goes to the basic left-handed layup. I think that's just adjusting to NBA defenses. He's going to realize very soon that you can't just go to the patented left-handed layup. Another thing, his floater hasn't really been falling. It's hard to tell if it's going to turn around without going into a ton of detail about the physics, but it looks like an okay floater. I think it's a fine floater. His mid-range game was good internationally. He had a good mid-range game. It just hasn't been falling early on. It looks smooth. It looks good. He's had a friendly roll a couple of times. He's had an unfriendly roll a couple of times. Again, it's adjusting to NBA defenses. You go from playing in Europe where you're not going up against an as athletic center. You're not going up against someone as tall, as good at shot blocking. So you're able to float it in. When you have that presence of someone come into your vision when you're about to put up a floater, anyone who's played basketball, even just watching the game of basketball, you can see it definitely puts you off. It's really adjusts your shot and not for the better. I think that's something that just needs an adjustment. Eventually he's going to realize those guys are going to come at him with more pace and with more verticality than he's ever faced before. And that's probably the reason behind him missing so many of those floaters, because he's adjusting during the shot instead of beforehand. It just leads to bad shots. That's kind of been the issue with floaters, in my opinion. That's his offensive game. Okay, let's set out the blueprint for his offensive game. Let's say 1 step back 3. Let's not start the game with a step back 3, because I don't think that's the best idea. I think you want to get rhythm, getting it off the catch, getting an open look. Let's try to get 3 open or catch and shoot threes. Let's try to get a step back 3 if he needs to do. If that's something that he really likes to do, we can limit it to 1 a game until he proves that it's an efficient way of scoring. There's 4 3-pointers there. And then get to the rim 4 times as well. 8 shots. 8 shots is nothing crazy. That's a decent amount. 3 of them, 2 of them being floaters, 2 of them being layups. Try to use your right hand. Try to reverse. Try to adjust in midair. Try to adjust beforehand. Do all of these things. Get some unpredictability, because at the moment his offensive game in terms of scoring is a little bit predictable, and that's the reason why he's getting swatted. That's the reason why his shots are getting altered. It's just adjusting to NBA life. That's something that needs to be spoken about when talking about Killian Hayes. These guys have not had enough time. Normally, I wouldn't even judge a rookie after 4 games. In normal circumstances, in these circumstances, the worst circumstances in NBA history for a rookie in terms of getting like 3 weeks with the team, not getting a summer league, going straight into preseason, straight into NBA. It's incredibly tough. He's someone who's starting as well. He's going up against the starting unit, which means the best defenders on the team. You've got guys like Malachi Flynn, just for example. He's a mature age guy playing for the Raptors who have struggled and need a backup point guard. But obviously Nick Nurse doesn't believe he's ready, because I don't think they've had enough time to embed him into the offense. As a point guard, to not have enough time to work with your team, to work out plays, the pick and rolls, to work out how to move off ball, where to go, where other players are going to be in your team, because that's everything that you need to figure out. To only have a few weeks and to be asked to come in and start from the get-go and then perform, It's just ludicrous. Like, think to yourself, that is not a reasonable expectation to have of him. You have to look at the glimpses that he's giving you. You can't just look at his overall games and think, he's shooting 20%, he's only averaged 5 points, he's a bust. That's just crazy to me. And then he's also got in the back of his mind, Coach Casey likes to sit his rookies when they make a couple of mistakes. The only game that he didn't have that in the back of his mind was the best game of his career so far against the Atlanta Hawks. Is that a coincidence? The one game Derrick Rose doesn't play. The one game he knows he's going to get minutes. He has the best game of his career. I can't believe that's a coincidence. It's mental as much as it is physical. And mentally, Casey needs to do a better job of assuring him that he's going to get minutes and he's going to get playing time regardless of how he performs, because it's clearly affecting him. There's just no way it's a coincidence. The one game Derrick Rose is out, the one game he knows he's short of minutes for the whole night, he has his best game of his career. In terms of another positive, defensively he looks pretty good. He forced a couple of turnovers out of Trae Young. Trae Young put up 29 points, 15 of those were free throws, 6 of those free throws came at the end when the Pistons were trying to keep the game going. So you can look at that as around 23 points to get from Trae Young, force a turnover, guard him on multiple possessions, guard Steph Curry. He's taken the challenge of going up against the best guards every single night, and he's done a pretty good job. I think when you went up against the Cavs, Colin Sexton was slicing up Derrick Rose a lot more than he was slicing up Killian Hayes, from what I remember. He's been a very solid defender. He's active. He gets in the passing lane. He's pretty good on ball. His off ball still has room to improve. Sometimes he misses rotations, but that's another thing that goes back to not having enough time with the team. That's something that you really need to work on in practice. He hasn't had that opportunity, but as a whole, defensively, he's shown upside. As a whole, what am I really looking for that's concerned me? There's been a couple of things. His shot selection, maybe he doesn't have a go-to shot at this point in time. He can't get to the rim like other guys like an Anthony Edwards because he's not as bigger framed, he's not as athletic. His athleticism, that's probably the only thing that's really concerning at this point in time, and you could genuinely be concerned about whether he has that quick enough first step to get to the rim and get those easy points, to draw contact, to make shots off the dribble, to do all of these things. But if you look at his passing game, his defense, just the fact that he's had 2 weeks to come in and be a starting point guard going up against good NBA defenses, adjusting to a different league. A lot of players start their careers slowly, and if there was ever a year to start your career slowly, given the circumstances, this is the year. I think once he starts to get more assurance that he's going to get the playing time regardless, once the offense starts to move more, the offense hasn't been fantastic, it's been a bit stagnant, and that doesn't help him out as someone who wants to shoot off the ball as well, which he needs to do. Needs to move off the ball a bit better, sharpens up his shot selection, gets a bit more involved in the pick and roll game. It's going to be fine. I've been talking for way too long. If you did enjoy the video, the screen is now blank. I'll catch you next time. Bye. Drop a like, cool, subscribe to the channel.